Imagine being trapped, not just in a prison, but in a device designed to inflict unimaginable pain. A place where survival is a punishment in itself. Today, we're diving into the darkest corners of history to uncover 10 of the worst punishments ever devised by humanity. Warning: this journey is not for the faint of heart. The brazen bull is one of the most infamous torture devices ever conceived. It was invented in ancient Greece by a metalworker named Pericles of Athens, who presented it to Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas. Picture this: a massive bronze bull, hollow inside, with a small door for the unfortunate victim to enter. Once trapped, the bull was placed over a roaring fire, slowly heating the metal until the person inside was roasted alive. The twisted genius of this device lay in its design. Small tubes within the bull transformed the victim's screams into eerie, animalistic sounds. The crowd would hear what they thought was a bull roaring, but it was actually the cries of agony. The inventor, Pericles, supposedly became the bull's first victim after demonstrating its functionality. Can you imagine the terror of hearing those metallic roars while knowing what was happening inside? Let's move to ancient Persia, where one of the most horrifying punishments in recorded history was practiced: Scaphism, or the boats. The process began with the victim being stripped naked and strapped between two wooden boats or hollowed-out logs. Their body was then smeared with honey to attract insects, and they were force-fed milk and honey until severe diarrhea ensued. This combination of exposure, dehydration, and filth turned the victim into a living buffet for swarms of insects. They would slowly eat away at the victim's flesh, often starting with open wounds. Days could pass, sometimes even weeks, before death finally came as a merciful release. Imagine the excruciating pain and mental torment of being devoured alive. This punishment was so effective at instilling fear that it remained in use for centuries. In ancient China, lingqi, or death by 1,000 cuts, was as gruesome as it sounds. This execution method was used as a way to punish severe crimes and strike fear into the hearts of potential wrongdoers. The condemned person was tied to a wooden frame while the executioner made small, deliberate cuts to the body, starting with non-lethal areas like the arms or legs. The idea was to prolong suffering and humiliation. Each cut added to the excruciating pain until the victim either bled out or succumbed to shock. What made this punishment even more horrifying was its symbolic meaning. It was considered the ultimate dishonor because the body was mutilated, preventing proper burial rites. Families of the condemned were often forced to watch, adding an extra layer of cruelty to this already nightmarish scenario. Imagine being a sailor in the 17th century, living in constant fear of keelhauling. This punishment was reserved for disobedient seafarers and pirates, and it was as dangerous as it was brutal. The victim was tied to a rope that looped beneath the ship, and they were dragged under the hull. The barnacles and sharp debris encrusted on the bottom of the ship would shred the victim's skin, leaving deep, painful cuts. Saltwater would pour into the wounds, causing unbearable stinging. The unlucky ones drowned during the process, but for those who survived, infection and scarring were almost guaranteed. The sheer unpredictability of keelhauling made it a feared deterrent for anyone who dared to step out of line. The Iron Maiden, often depicted in horror movies and novels, is another device that might feel like fiction, but evidence suggests it was more than just a legend. This spiked, coffin-like contraption was designed to close around its victim, impaling them with sharp metal spikes. The cruel ingenuity of the Iron Maiden lay in its precision. Many of the spikes were placed to miss vital organs, prolonging the victim's agony. Some historians debate whether the Iron Maiden was used as extensively as claimed, but its reputation as an instrument of torture has endured for centuries. Even if it were a symbolic deterrent rather than an actual tool, the psychological impact of merely imagining such a death is enough to chill the blood. The Pear of Anguish is another device that exemplifies the sheer creativity behind historical cruelty. This small, pear-shaped metal instrument was inserted into the victim's mouth or another orifice, depending on the alleged crime. Once inside, the device was slowly twisted to expand, tearing flesh and causing unbearable pain. It was often used in Europe during the Inquisition, targeting heretics, witches, and those accused of sodomy. The psychological terror of knowing what was about to happen must have been almost as agonizing as the punishment itself. Even today, the pair of anguish stands as a symbol of how far humans have gone to enforce conformity and silence dissent. One of the most well-documented punishments in history is crucifixion. The Romans perfected this horrifying method of execution, using it as a public spectacle to discourage rebellion and criminal behavior. Victims were nailed or tied to a wooden cross and left to hang until they died, usually from a combination of asphyxiation, blood loss, and sheer exhaustion. Crucifixion wasn't just a punishment. It was a slow, degrading death meant to strip the victim of dignity. The psychological torture of being displayed before a crowd, combined with the excruciating physical pain, made this one of the most feared penalties of the ancient world. The breaking wheel, or Catherine wheel, was a gruesome method of execution used across medieval Europe. The condemned were tied to a large wooden wheel, and their limbs were systematically broken with a heavy iron bar. The shattered remains of their body were then woven through the spokes of the wheel and left on display for all to see. This punishment wasn't just about causing pain. It was a public spectacle meant to serve as a deterrent. The symbolism of the broken body on the wheel was clear. Defy the law, and your fate will be just as grim. What's truly horrifying is the length of time some victims survived after enduring this punishment. Boiling alive was a punishment reserved for those accused of heinous crimes such as treason, poisoning, or even counterfeiting. Victims were either placed in a giant cauldron of cold liquid, which was then heated, or they were submerged into already boiling substances like water, oil, or tar. The slow cooking process ensured maximum pain, with every nerve-ending screaming in agony. This method was used in medieval Europe and parts of Asia, and its sheer brutality ensured that it struck fear into the hearts of anyone who witnessed it. Finally, we come to the blood eagle, a ritualistic Viking punishment so gruesome that some historians debate whether it actually happened. According to Norse sagas, the blood eagle involved cutting open the victim's back, breaking their ribs, and pulling out their lungs to resemble wings. The victim was often kept alive during the entire process, and the execution was carried out in a way that honored the gods. Whether fact or myth, the blood eagle remains one of the most horrifying depictions of punishment in human history. These punishments are a haunting reminder of humanity's darker side. They reveal how fear, power, and cruelty have been wielded throughout history. Which of these punishments shocked you the most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're as fascinated by history's darker corners as I am, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.